Hey everyone, it's Kevin Jones with Life, Mind, and Money. Hey, we're going to give you another stimulus update and talk about some debit cards. Also, for money people who are deceased, what has to happen with that money. And also talk about the Fed Chair Powell and our Treasury Secretary Mnuchin were on the Hill, and they kind of have some different opinions. So we're going to kind of explain what's happening there and get you caught up. So let's begin. As always, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please do so, as we can provide additional updates as we get through these times and everything about personal finance. So let's dive in. Once again, got my sheets here. And the first thing we're going to be talking about is prepaid debit cards. So what are you probably talking about here? So what's happened is that over 140 million people have received their original stimulus check, which is great. But there are still about 10 million people that still are waiting, whether it was coming by physical check, as we've talked about before, but there was many people who missed the deadline of May 13th to provide their direct deposit information through the Get My Payment site. So, who are these people? These are people who are lower income, who may not have banking information, or a lot of people fit in other categories. And so, if you weren't able to provide that information, the government has stepped up and identified about 4 million people who are going to get a prepaid debit card mailed to them very shortly. So this money can be used, for shopping, stimulus, which we would hope you'd use it for, but also that money can be deposited directly out of the card at an ATMs if you need direct access to the cash. So that is something new, but this will only affect 4 million people who had no banking information whatsoever and didn't have anything provided to the IRS. And so those are the people who will be affected and will be getting this money very shortly. So, switching gears, we're going to talk about deceased people who may have received a stimulus check or had got a direct deposit. And I've got a sheet here talking about a statement the IRS gave that I'm going to relay back to you. And it really talks about that any money, a check or direct deposit to a deceased person must be returned or repaid to the IRS, even if that person has died recently. And the statement also gives that the money must be returned, the entire payment, unless payment was made to joint filers, so marriage filed jointly in most cases, and one spouse had not died before receipt of the payment, in which case you only need to return the portion of the payment made on account of the descendant. So this amount will be $1,200 unless adjusted gross income exceeded $150,000, which that's when it started scaling down in the amount of money you got. So what that means is that you really need to be on the lookout. Unfortunately, if somebody has died in your life and you saw money come their way before the receipt of this payment, that money will be required to be either be paid back, or you'll need to work that out by paying that back through your next taxes, either way. Now, moving on to the next subject is that yesterday, the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and our Fed Chair Powell, who we talked about in our last video, were on the Hill, Capitol Hill, and they were up there to talk to the House of Representatives about how progress has been going with the stimulus. And what became apparent is that each of them had very differing opinions on the state of the economy. Mnuchin was probably pretty much of the mindset of, we've had 3 stimuluses. Yeah, he recognized that a 4th stimulus was passed in the House, but he was in a wait and see mode. Where Powell was basically the opposite and was of concern of our economy and believes that additional stimulus, whether that came through something passed through Congress or something they can do within the Fed themselves, which he already talked about on the 60-minute interview, that they had a lot of tools that they have yet to deploy and may need to do so soon. So you can see there's very different opinions between what's going on in the White House and what the Fed believes in terms of how to deal with this crisis. Now, building on that, also, we talked about the HEROES Act in the last video, or the House passed, and now it's going on to the Senate. And the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin basically confirmed that the Senate Majority Leader McConnell was basically, we're in a wait and see mode right now. And he basically literally stated that we're going to wait a couple of weeks to kind of see where we're at and how we want to proceed forward. So basically the HEROES Act is kind of in a stalemate right now, and I don't think anything will be done for it for some time. And it may be another month before they have more data and want to kind of proceed with this. But it didn't stop the House Republicans, as they are trying to push through some bits and pieces of that HEROES Act through the House in order to provide some protections like PPP money, and then also some other costs that they want to try to add some elements of the HEROES Act. If they can't get it all, they're trying to get little pieces of it, and hopefully the Senate will agree with that. We'll have to see on what happens with that over the next few weeks. Also, the senators, a couple of Democrat senators just released a plan today about, 36 million people are in unemployment right now, which is just historic. And they want to provide a tax credit of $4,000 to people to get some kind of training, whether that's a degree or some kind of online education or a certificate. And this credit can be used all the way through the end of 2021. Once again, it's another idea out there to kind of spur people to get trained in different areas that maybe they weren't in prior when they hit unemployment, so that when they enter the workforce, you can either come back to that original job or go into different areas of business. We'll see. Once again, more ideas out there, but I'm not sure if they'll get passed in the long run. So the last thing I will leave with you is, once again, the Fed Chairman Powell, the minutes of their last meeting, the Fed meeting, were just literally released about an hour ago. And there's some concerning information in there, that the Fed is not just worried about our own economy, but they're worried about what's ahead. If you watch that 60-minute interview, he was really like historic times for the Fed, because they're not just looking at financial data anymore. They're literally looking at case rates and the medical side of things and how it affects the economy, which is quite unusual for them. And that really came out in the minutes. So he's also, all of the Fed chairs and governors are really worried about not just the current state right now, but they're worried about what the future may have and if more cases will come back. So we'll have to kind of see how they're going to act. And that kind of really aligns with Fed Chair Powell's comments on the Hill yesterday, that I think he probably will be quicker to take action on different things than whether the House or the Senate or the White House does in the near term. Once again, we'll have to see. So that's your update for today, May 20th. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Once again, if you haven't done so, please smash that like button for taking on the YouTube algorithm. Leave your comments below. And once again, if you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button as we continue to provide additional information for you to get through these times and also advance your personal finance. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.